On September 18, 1989, a strange and heavy quietness fell over the peaceful neighborhood streets near Ford and Gottfriedson in Canton Township, Michigan. Roy Miller, a big construction worker, heard the scary sounds of gunshots, two loud bangs that made him turn his pickup truck sharply. Then he saw a blue car with a white top speed away fast, throwing gravel everywhere. A few minutes later, Officer David Jenkins found a woman lying face down and still, partly hidden in the tall grass by the side of the road. Her name was Beverly Wivell. Her purse was gone, her shoes were scratched up, and there wasn't much blood, which meant this wasn't where she died. The blue car, Beverly's Ford Fairmont, was later found left behind with the engine still running and the driver's door open at Griffin Park. She had been shot, sexually attacked, and left to die. The first thoughts that Beverly had just left or been in an accident ended with the sad truth. The young mother, who had been full of quiet strength and dreams just hours before, had been killed. The first idea that this was a random roadside attack fell apart. A bad person had been there. Someone careful. Someone who left behind a terrible, almost perfect crime scene that gave very few clues right away. For 35 years, the murder of Beverly Wivell haunted Michigan, a life taken too soon. A son, Dale, and his grandparents Franklin and Eleanor Wivell left looking for answers that never came. Before we continue this shocking story, take a second to hit subscribe and like this video. Your support helps bring these forgotten stories to light, and it will make sure you don't miss any future uploads. Beverly's death sent a shock through suburban Michigan. It became a scary reminder, proof that dark secrets can hide in normal-looking places. In 2024, the whispers of an old wrong finally found a voice through new improvements in DNA technology. The investigation uncovered not a quick ghost, but a real person. Someone who did this, who had a disturbing past, a history of dangerous activities, who had quietly blended into Michigan's communities for decades, his terrible secret carefully hidden. This case shows the never-give-up dedication of families who kept hope alive, the unwavering commitment of detectives who refused to let time erase the truth, and the life-changing power of modern forensic science in giving voice to those long silenced. The once calm community of Canton Township was deeply changed. A cold wind of fear swept through its streets decades after the crime, forcing neighbors to look at each other with newly awakened suspicion. The surface of small-town safety had been torn back forever, revealing a deeper, disturbing darkness that would ultimately crack wide open when the full truth came out 35 years later. The most haunting discovery, a key person connected with a chilling history, had escaped detection for far too long. For decades, this person maintained a look of normalcy, perhaps even going to community events, hiding unspeakable acts behind a mask of everyday life. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. I'm always fascinated to see how far these stories travel, and how they connect us across distances. Today we'll walk through the events of September 1989. We'll trace decades of unanswered questions, and reveal the breakthrough that finally brought a twisted form of justice to Beverly Wivell. This is a story of loss, persistence, deception, and ultimately, justice delayed but not denied. The late summer air in Canton Township, Michigan on September 18, 1989 carried a deceiving crispness. While the leaves on the maple trees were just beginning to turn red with autumn's arrival, the morning still held the gentle warmth of the fading season. It was a time of year when the rhythm of suburban life felt comfortable, predictable, a surface that would soon be brutally shattered. In a modest two-story house nestled on the quieter edges of Ann Arbor, Franklin Wivell was already up, the smell of brewing coffee mixing with the faint smell of Eleanor Wivell's toast. Their grandson, Dale Swanson, a tall and skinny 13-year-old with a constantly messy look, was still fighting the call of his alarm clock upstairs. Downstairs, their daughter Beverly Wivell moved with a quiet efficiency that hid the trouble of her recent years. At 31, Beverly had a quiet strength. Her brown hair was often pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her eyes, though sometimes shadowed by worry, always softened when she looked at her son. Beverly had been divorced from her ex-husband Jeremy Thorne for over a year now. The split had been bitter, leaving her emotionally drained and struggling with money. Jeremy, a man prone to angry outbursts, had made the separation difficult, often dragging out legal proceedings and leaving Beverly feeling constantly on edge. Dale, their only child, had come to live permanently with Franklin and Eleanor, a decision born of stability for him during Beverly's struggles. She loved Dale fiercely, Her son was the unwavering anchor in her often stormy life. But finding her footing again had been harder than she'd thought. She longed for a stable job, a place of her own where she and Dale could truly build a new life free from the echoes of her past marriage. Her current living situation was far from ideal. While she did have a small apartment in Canton, not far from her parents' house, she often found herself drifting. Sometimes she stayed at her boyfriend Carl Henderson's place, other times with various friends, and on nights when the tension with her parents over Carl became too much, or when her own apartment felt too lonely and her boyfriend wasn't available, Beverly sometimes slept in her car. Dale, too, in his teenage bluntness, had made it clear he didn't want his mother bringing her boyfriend to his grandparents' home. This unspoken rule, along with her parents' subtle disapproval, meant Beverly rarely stayed overnight under their roof, even when she came to visit Dale. This morning, however, was an exception. She had stayed to make sure Dale made it to school. "Morning, sleepyhead," Beverly called playfully as Dale finally walked down the stairs, rubbing his eyes. His long brown hair, much like his mother's, fell across his forehead. "5 more minutes," Dale mumbled, grabbing a piece of toast from the kitchen counter. Beverly smiled, her heart aching with a familiar mixture of love and guilt. "No can do, big guy. We're on a tight schedule. Gotta get you to Canton Middle on time." She glanced at her watch. It was just past 8:15 a.m. Franklin Wivell, a man of few words but deep affections, cleared his throat from behind his morning newspaper. "Everything ready, Bev?" "All set, Dad," Beverly replied, giving him a quick, affectionate pat on the shoulder. Eleanor emerged from the pantry, a worried frown on her face. She often worried about Beverly's unsettled life, her daughter's fragile attempts to rebuild. "You'll call me later, won't you, dear?" Eleanor asked, her voice soft. Beverly hugged her mother tightly. "Of course, Mom. I'm going to follow up on that job lead at the library. Wish me luck," she winked, trying to put optimism into her voice. A few minutes later, Beverly's blue Ford Fairmont, its white top showing signs of age and Michigan winters, pulled out of the driveway. Dale sat in the passenger seat, already lost in thought, probably thinking about the day's school drama. Beverly kept an eye on the road, occasionally glancing at her son, memorizing his profile, the way his backpack slumped against the seat. It was a simple, ordinary moment, one that would soon become a ghost in the memory of her family. At 8:30 a.m., Beverly pulled up to the curb of Canton Middle School. "All right, sport. Have a great day," she said, leaning over to kiss the top of Dale's head. "Yeah, you too, Mom," Dale replied, grabbing his backpack. He hesitated for a second, then gave her a quick hug, a rare public display of affection from a 13-year-old. "Love you." "Love you more," Beverly whispered back, a lump forming in her throat. Dale opened the car door and joined the stream of students heading into the brick building. Beverly watched until he disappeared inside, then took a deep breath. Her next stop was the library for that job inquiry, but with some time before her appointment and nowhere else she particularly wanted to be, she drove a short distance into a less busy section of Canton Township, pulling over. The late summer warmth made the car surprisingly comfortable. She decided to rest her eyes for a few minutes, clear her head before facing the day. The peace of the morning was shattered about an hour later. A little before 9 a.m., an unexpected, chilling sound pierced the quiet suburban hum near the intersection of Ford and Gottfriedson roads, the sharp, unmistakable crack of gunshots. Roy Miller, a big construction worker with a thick mustache, was heading to a job site on Gottfriedson Road. He was driving his pickup truck through a neighborhood street, sipping from a thermos of coffee when the sudden blasts made him swerve slightly. 2 clear shots, maybe 3. His eyes naturally scanned the area. He saw nothing right away. Then, from a cluster of overgrown bushes and scrubland just off the main road, a blue car with a white top sped away quickly, tires spitting gravel. It looked like an older model, possibly a Ford Fairmont. The driver, whom Roy couldn't see clearly through the tinted windows and distance, seemed to be in a hurry. Roy, startled and nervous, didn't stop. He sped up, telling himself it was probably just hunters or kids with firecrackers, but the scene had disturbed him. By the time he reached his construction site a few minutes later, his unease lingered. He decided to call the Canton Township Police Department. "Yeah, I just heard some shots fired near Ford and Gottfriedson," Roy told the dispatcher, his voice still a bit shaky. "And some old blue car with a white top just tore out of there." The call came into the Canton Township Police Department at 9 a.m. Within minutes, a patrol car, lights flashing silently, was speeding toward the reported location. Officer David Jenkins, a young patrolman with barely 2 years on the force, was the first to arrive. He exited his cruiser cautiously, hand hovering near his sidearm. The sounds of distant traffic and birdsong did little to ease the tension. The air hung heavy. No immediate sign of trouble. Then, partly hidden in the tall, dry grass by the roadside, he saw it, a figure lying face down and still. As he drew closer, the scene solidified into a horrific picture. A woman dressed in everyday clothes lay motionless. Officer Jenkins's breath caught in his throat. He immediately radioed for backup in an ambulance, his voice tight with urgency. Female victim down. Appears to be a gunshot wound. Requesting Detective Sergeant Luke and forensic team immediately. Looks like a homicide. Within the next hour, the intersection of Ford and Gottfriedson roads transformed into a flurry of activity. Yellow crime scene tape snapped tightly against utility poles, blocking off the area. Patrol cars, their blue and red lights painting the suburban foliage in stark, pulsating colors, blocked off traffic. Detectives and uniformed officers swarmed the scene, their movements precise and grim. Detective Casey Luke, a veteran investigator with the Washington County Sheriff's Office, arrived with his partner, Detective Serena Ulbrich. Luke, a man in his late 40s with a tired but sharp gaze, knelt beside the body, his face etched with somber concentration. The victim was Beverly Wivell. Her purse was missing and her shoes were scuffed, as if she'd put up a struggle or been dragged. As the crime scene examination began, led by forensic technician Eileen Kelly, a stark and immediate inconsistency began to emerge. The fatal wound was clear, a single gunshot to the chest. However, there was a shocking lack of blood, far less than what would be expected from a close-range shooting that had killed someone on the spot. The surrounding grass, though disturbed, didn't show the soaked crimson typical of a body collapsing from such a wound. "Casey, take a look at this," Eileen Kelly called out, her voice grim as she carefully examined Beverly's clothing. "There are drag marks and some scuffing on her jacket. This isn't where she died." Detective Luke's eyes narrowed. He looked around the scene again, his gaze sweeping the quiet, unassuming suburban roadside. The first assumption that this was the primary murder scene began to crumble. "So she was killed elsewhere, then dumped here," Luke murmured, straightening up. The gunshots the witness heard could have been a final shot, an execution, or just a distraction. This complicates things. The possibility that Beverly had been attacked, killed, and then moved painted an even more chilling picture of the perpetrator's cold calculation. The quiet suburban street, intended as a resting spot, had become her final desecrated resting place. The search for answers widened immediately. Investigators fanned out, questioning neighbors, but few had seen anything beyond the blue and white car speeding away. The community, usually so calm, began to ripple with unease. Then, a few hours later, another critical piece of the puzzle surfaced. A patrol unit found a blue Ford Fairmont with a white top, engine running, driver's door open, and a woman's purse sitting neatly on the front seat. Abandoned at Griffin Park, a secluded spot favored by teenagers and dog walkers at the corner of Cherry Hill and Sheldon Roads, a few miles from where Beverly's body had been discovered. A quick check of the registration confirmed it was Beverly Wivell's car. The discovery of the vehicle, running and intact yet empty and abandoned, only deepened the chilling mystery surrounding Beverly's final hours. The scene was eerily still, a stark testament to an unfinished journey and a life abruptly taken. The discovery of Beverly's car at Griffin Park, mere miles from her body, confirmed the investigators' grim hypothesis. The scene at Ford and Gottfriedson roads was not where Beverly Wivell had truly met her end. The abandoned vehicle, with its still-running engine and purse left untouched on the seat, spoke volumes of a crime both abrupt and unsettlingly personal. The police now had two separate crime scenes, each holding pieces of a puzzle, but neither revealing the full picture. Under the watchful eye of forensic technician Eileen Kelly, every inch of Beverly's Ford Fairmont was carefully processed. Fingerprints were lifted from the steering wheel and door handles. Fiber samples were collected from the seats, and any potential trace evidence was carefully bagged. The undisturbed purse containing cash and Beverly's identification immediately ruled out robbery as a primary motive. This wasn't a carjacking gone wrong. This was something far more sinister. The driver's door found open suggested a quick departure, perhaps under threat or a killer's hasty exit. Back at the Washington County Sheriff's Office, Detective Casey Luke and Detective Serena Ulbrich pored over the early findings. The autopsy report, which arrived a day later, only intensified the horror. Beverly Wivell had not only been shot in the chest, but another .45 caliber bullet had been fired into her mouth, a brutal execution-style wound, often showing an attempt to silence a victim or an act of extreme rage. The report also confirmed what investigators had suspected from the crime scene. Beverly had been sexually assaulted. A sexual assault kit had been carefully collected, along with other trace evidence hoping to yield DNA, a new science in 1989. The news of Beverly's murder rocked Canton Township. A brutal crime in their quiet suburban streets was unthinkable. Fear, cold and creeping, began to spread. Residents who once left doors unlocked now double-checked their latches. Children playing outside were called in earlier. The local media, led by the Canton Chronicle reporter Brenda Mason, plastered Beverly's photo, her gentle, tired eyes looking out from newsprint across front pages. Everyone knew Beverly Wivell or knew of her. She was a mother, a neighbor, a familiar face struggling to get by. Her tragic end felt like a violation of their community's unspoken peace. For Franklin and Eleanor Wivell, the news shattered their world forever. Their quiet home in Ann Arbor became a place of unbearable grief. Dale Swanson, their grandson, was utterly devastated. The 13-year-old boy who just hours earlier had shared a routine morning goodbye with his mother was now grappling with a reality no child should ever face. She just dropped me off, Dale choked out to his grandparents, his voice hoarse from crying. She said she loved me. Franklin, usually calm and steady, held his grandson tight, tears streaming down his own face, unable to offer any comfort. Eleanor, her face a mask of deep sorrow, moved through the house in a daze, clutching photos of Beverly, whispering her daughter's name. Detective Luke and Ulbrich immediately began interviewing Beverly's friends, family, and acquaintances. Her ex-husband, Jeremy Thorne, was among the first questioned. Jeremy, a stocky man with a short temper, was cooperative but visibly angry, protesting his innocence with a belligerence that made the detectives watchful. He strongly denied any involvement, claiming he was at work all morning. His alibi, though initially confirmed by his employer, was put under scrutiny. Luke, familiar with the anger of estranged spouses, knew better than to dismiss him too quickly. Beverly's boyfriend, Carl Henderson, a man known to frequent local bars, also provided an alibi that was investigated. Carl, a truck driver, said he was out of town on a delivery run. Neither man had any concrete evidence tying them directly to the crime. "We're looking for someone who knew her," Detective Luke told a small gathering of deputies and investigators. Someone who knew her routine, knew she might be in her car alone after dropping off her son. The execution-style shot, the sexual assault, this wasn't random. Not entirely. The investigation cast a wide net. Every lead, however slim, was pursued. Patrol units combed the areas around Ford and Gottfredson Roads and Griffin Park, searching for anything missed. A discarded shell casing, a piece of clothing, a personal item. Forensic teams carefully examined the retrieved evidence, hoping for a clear fingerprint or a unique fiber. Public appeals were made, with posters featuring Beverly's photo appearing on lampposts and bulletin boards across Canton and Ann Arbor. A reward fund was established by concerned citizens, organized by Community Watch organizer Cheryl Benson. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The leads one by one dissolved into dead ends. Jeremy Thorne's alibi, while initially suspicious, held up under further examination. Carl Henderson's alibi also seemed solid. No clear fingerprints emerged from the car. The trace evidence from the sexual assault kit, while carefully collected, yielded no clear matches with the limited DNA technology available in 1989. The blue car with the white top described by Roy Miller was Beverly's own vehicle, which meant the person who did this had either driven it away and abandoned it, or forced her to drive it before leaving her for dead. But the identity of that person remained stubbornly hidden. As winter's first chill swept through Michigan, blanketing Canton in a layer of clean snow, the active investigation began to slow. Detective Luke held weekly meetings, but the whiteboard in the Washington County Sheriff's Office, once filled with arrows and potential suspect names, now mostly bore lines of no results. The first surge of public outrage and fear gradually faded into a chilling undercurrent of unease. The Canton Chronicle moved Beverly's story from front-page headlines to occasional mentions. The case of Beverly Wivell became another name whispered in the halls of the Washington County Sheriff's Office, a file thick with notes and dead ends that slowly but surely slid into the grim category of a cold case. Then, in early January 1990, a new, tantalizing lead emerged. An anonymous tip called into the Washington County Sheriff's Office suggested focusing on Wally Henderson, a distant cousin of Carl Henderson. Wally, a known petty criminal with a history of minor assaults and a habit of lurking in parks, reportedly drove an older model blue car, albeit a different make, but one with a similar white top. More critically, Wally had been seen in Griffin Park on occasion, and some neighbors recalled him acting jumpy around the time of the murder. The detectives, desperate for a breakthrough, moved quickly. On a cold, gray morning, Detective Luke and Ulbrich, accompanied by two uniformed officers, converged on Wally Henderson's rundown mobile home on the outskirts of Ypsilanti. Wally, a thin man with shifty eyes, was initially evasive. He claimed he was out of town or just keeping to himself during the time of the murder. However, under persistent questioning and confronted with the description of the car and his known haunts, Wally began to sweat. He was brought in for questioning, his face appearing in the local news as a potential suspect, igniting a fragile flicker of hope within the community and, agonizingly, within the Wivell family. Franklin and Eleanor, watching the evening news, saw Wally's mugshot and allowed themselves a moment of guarded relief. Dale, now dealing with the new school year, heard whispers from classmates and, for the first time in months, felt a slight easing of the heavy burden on his young shoulders. Justice, they dared to believe, might finally be within reach, but that hope was short-lived. Wally Henderson's alibi, while initially vague, solidified. His girlfriend, Loretta Vance, provided a detailed account of their whereabouts on September 18th, backed up by phone records and a witness who saw them together at a bingo hall miles away from Canton. Crucially, forensic analysis of hair and fiber samples taken from Wally's car and clothing yielded no match to Beverly. After intense interrogation, Wally's story held, and without any direct physical evidence or a broken alibi, the police were forced to release him. The public outcry was swift and disheartened. The Canton Chronicle ran headlines questioning the police's swift arrest. For the Wivell family, the setback was devastating. The brief, cruel glimpse of potential closure had been snatched away, replaced by an even deeper pit of despair. The incident served as a stark, painful reminder of how far they were from the truth. After the crushing disappointment of Wally Henderson's release, the case of Beverly Wivell truly settled into a long, agonizing silence. The promising leads had vanished. The initial fervor of the investigation had faded, and the trail of evidence had grown impossibly cold. The yellowed files, once carefully reviewed, were carefully boxed and placed in the cold case archives of the Washington County Sheriff's Office. For Detective Casey Luke, Beverly's case became a silent torment, a grim reminder of an unsolved puzzle that had once consumed his waking hours. He would occasionally pull the file, its edges worn from countless readings, flipping through the faded reports, hoping some overlooked detail, some hidden clue, would suddenly leap out at him, but it never did. The years bled into one another, turning months into decades. The 1990s gave way to the 2000s, and then the 2010s. Canton Township, like many suburban communities, continued its steady growth. But the shadow of Beverly Wivell's unsolved murder lingered, an unhealed scar. But for Franklin and Eleanor Wivell, time offered no such relief. Beverly's absence was a wound that never closed. They aged, their once vibrant energy slowly diminished by an unending grief. Eleanor would often sit by the window, staring out at the rose bush Beverly had planted years ago, her eyes clouded with unspoken pain. Franklin, though he tried to remain strong for his wife and grandson, carried a deep sadness that seemed to deepen with each passing year. The immense weight of the decades eventually proved too much for them both. In the late 2000s, Franklin Wivell, worn down by nearly 20 years of unanswered questions, passed away quietly in his sleep. His final moments were spent without the justice he had desperately sought for his daughter. Eleanor, already fragile, never truly recovered from the double loss of her daughter and her lifelong companion. She joined him not long after, her health deteriorating rapidly, the grief compounding the physical toll. Both carried the heavy burden of the unsolved case to their graves. their greatest wish tragically unfulfilled. This deep loss left Dale Swanson as the sole torchbearer of the family's enduring hope. The cheerful 13-year-old had been replaced by a quiet, thoughtful young man. He carried his grief alone through the 2010s, haunted by the memory of that last goodbye. "The love you more," his mother had whispered, which now echoed with agonizing finality. Every September 18th, the anniversary of her death, was a bleak, silent marker for him. He finished school, went to college, and eventually started a family of his own. But the void left by his mother's murder remained. He attended occasional community memorials for victims of unsolved crimes, always carrying a small framed photo of Beverly, her smiling face a stark contrast to his own burdened expression. He didn't expect miracles, only answers. Who took her from us? Why? He would often ask himself, the question's a constant, silent torment. In the Washington County Sheriff's Office, the cold case unit, always underfunded and overwhelmed, saw Beverly's file as one of many tragedies. New cases came and went, but the Wivell file, identified by its early September 1989 date, remained stubbornly unresolved. Yet a quiet revolution was brewing in the world of forensic science. DNA technology, still in its infancy when Beverly was murdered, was advancing at an astonishing pace. What was impossible in 1989, generating a clear profile from old samples, was becoming increasingly possible with each passing year. Then came 2024. 35 years after Beverly Wivell's life was brutally cut short, the world had changed beyond recognition. Smartphones, the internet, and a globalized society were far removed from the late 80s, but the one constant was the enduring pain of the Wivell family and the lingering injustice of an unsolved murder. Driven by renewed dedication and the relentless advocacy of newly appointed Chief of Detectives Austin Pearson, the Washington County Sheriff's Office made a monumental decision. Beverly Wivell's cold case would be reopened, not with old investigative techniques, but with the cutting-edge power of modern forensic science. Detective Austin Pearson, a sharp, forward-thinking investigator who had joined the force long after Beverly's murder, saw the potential in the carefully preserved sexual assault kit from 1989. He knew that the original sample, though not enough for analysis back then, might hold the key now. He secured funding and authorization, working closely with the Michigan State Police to send the precious evidence to Othram, a forensic genomics laboratory known for its success in cracking cold cases using advanced DNA techniques, including forensic genealogy. Othram, based in Texas, was then experiencing an unprecedented influx of decades-old cases from law enforcement agencies nationwide, a testament to its groundbreaking reputation, making the Wivell case one of hundreds waiting for analysis. The process at Othram was painstaking. Scientists working in sterile labs, humming with sophisticated machinery, began the delicate work of extracting DNA from the decades-old sexual assault kit. Using next-generation sequencing, they painstakingly rebuilt the degraded genetic material, aiming to create a comprehensive DNA profile. This was not merely comparing a few markers. This was mapping an entire genome, a scientific task that felt more like science fiction to the investigators who had worked on the original case. After weeks of intense work, the Othram team delivered the breakthrough that had been 35 years in the making. They had successfully generated a strong male DNA profile from the 1989 sample. The next step was forensic genealogy. This innovative technique didn't require a direct match in criminal databases like CODIS, but instead compared the unknown profile to vast public genealogical databases, looking for distant relatives who had willingly submitted their DNA for ancestry research. From these distant family links, Othram's expert genealogists could then build detailed family trees, narrowing down the potential suspects generation by generation. The results sent a jolt through the Washington County Sheriff's Office. The genealogical analysis led them to a specific family tree, branches spreading across Michigan, and at the center of that tree a name emerged, a name that, for all its obscurity in the context of the 1989 investigation, would soon become synonymous with Beverly Wivell's final horrifying moments: Buster Robbins. Investigators quickly learned that Buster Robbins, now in his mid-60s, lived in Almont, Michigan, a small town in Lapeer County, roughly 1.5 to 2 hours northeast of Canton Township. Public records and local statements indicated he had been settled there for many years, likely since the 1990s, living a seemingly unremarkable life with his wife. He had even served as a reserve officer in the mounted unit of the Macomb County Sheriff's Office around 1989, a detail that added another layer of chilling irony to his profile. The lead investigator, Chief of Detectives Austin Pearson, held an urgent meeting with his team. "We have a name," he announced, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "Buster Robbins. Now we need to tie him directly to Beverly Wivell." The next phase was critical. Obtaining Buster Robbins' DNA without alerting him and without a warrant. A delicate and legally tricky undertaking known as stealth DNA collection. The cold case, frozen for decades, was now thawing rapidly, revealing a face from the shadows. The long journey for justice, delayed for 35 agonizing years, had finally found its path. Chief of Detectives Austin Pearson knew that the DNA matched to Buster Robbins, while a monumental breakthrough was merely the first step. To bring justice, they needed direct evidence, a modern DNA sample from Robbins himself, obtained legally and carefully. The Washington County Sheriff's Office, in collaboration with the Michigan State Police, initiated a covert surveillance operation on Buster Robbins' residence in Almont. Detective Serena Ulbrich, alongside newly assigned surveillance officer Robert "Rob" Miller, maintained a discreet watch on Robbins' daily routine. Almont, a small town with a quiet rhythm, offered few hiding places, but Robbins seemed oblivious to the eyes fixed upon him. He lived an unassuming life with his wife, his days structured by routine. For several tense days, the team waited for an opportunity. Then, on a crisp afternoon, Robbins emerged from his home, walked to his mailbox, and on his way back absent-mindedly tossed a used plastic drinking straw into his curbside recycling bin. It was the break they needed. Officer Miller, disguised as a utility worker, made a timely pass, deftly retrieving the straw. Later that week, another opportunity arose when Robbins, while at a local gas station, discarded a coffee cup into a public trash can. Each item was carefully sealed, transported, and rushed to the Michigan State Police Forensic Lab. The lab buzzed with a controlled urgency. Technicians carefully extracted DNA from the discarded straws and coffee cup. The tension in the room was strong as the results loaded onto screens. When the definitive perfect match flashed, it was a moment of deep vindication for Chief Pearson and his team. Buster Robbins' DNA profile was identical to the male DNA recovered from Beverly Wivell's sexual assault kit in 1989. 35 years of silence, of anguish, of unanswered questions had finally found a voice in the undeniable language of genetics. The arrest warrant was swiftly secured, building on the DNA evidence and the cold case file. On the morning of November 21, 2024, a joint task force from the Washington County Sheriff's Office and the Michigan State Police converged on Buster Robbins' Almont home. The quiet suburban street awoke to the presence of unmarked cars and uniformed officers. Buster Robbins, a man now in his mid-60s, was taken into custody without incident. He was stunned, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror, muttering, "What is this about?" as handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. During the search of his residence, investigators found a .45 caliber magazine and ammunition, consistent with the type of weapon used in Beverly Wivell's murder, a chilling piece of supporting evidence. Even more disturbing, a preliminary search of his electronic devices, including a tablet, revealed additional allegations related to child pornography, further solidifying the prosecution's view of him as a dangerous person. The news of Buster Robbins' arrest sent shockwaves through Canton Township and far beyond. Local news channels broke into regular programming, flashing Robbins' mugshot alongside a decades-old photo of Beverly Wivell. For Dale Swanson, now in his late 40s, the call from Chief of Detectives Austin Pearson was a seismic event. He listened in stunned silence as Pearson delivered the news, his voice breaking with a mixture of grief, relief, and an overwhelming surge of emotions he had kept buried for decades. His mother's killer had a name. The community reacted with a potent blend of outrage and a fragile sense of vindication. People recalled the terror of 1989, the fear that had gripped their quiet streets. Many were stunned that Robbins, a man who had lived for years in a neighboring community, had even served as a reserve officer for the Macomb County Sheriff's Office around the time of the murder. He was a reserve officer. "That's unthinkable," whispered Evelyn Cross, a longtime Canton resident, To the Canton Chronicle reporter Brenda Mason, her face pale with shock. To think he could have been hiding in plain sight all these years. Buster Robbins was formally charged in connection with the sexual assault and murder of Beverly Wivell in June 2025. During a preliminary court hearing at the Washington County Courthouse, the judge ruled that there was enough probable cause to move the case to a higher court. Robbins, appearing calm but visibly tense, formally entered a plea of not guilty. His defense attorney, Tim Turkelson, immediately requested that Robbins be released on bail. Turkelson argued strongly that aside from the DNA evidence, there was little to no evidence linking him directly to the murder. He suggested that the DNA could have resulted from a consensual encounter, a defense strategy aimed at casting doubt on the prosecution's case. However, Washington County Prosecutor Eli Savit countered fiercely, emphasizing the terrible nature of the crime, the execution-style shooting, and the additional allegations against Robbins, including child pornography. Savit argued that Robbins was an extreme flight risk and a danger to the community. The judge, after careful consideration, agreed with the prosecution, setting an exceptionally high bond, effectively keeping Buster Robbins detained pending trial. As of the latest reports in late 2025, the case is still awaiting trial. The final pretrial hearing is scheduled for January 2026, with the trial itself expected to begin in February 2026. For Dale Swanson, the wait continues, but it is a wait filled with a different kind of hope. The decades of agonizing silence have been broken. A name has emerged from the darkness. The Wivell family and the community of Canton Township now brace themselves for the difficult legal battle ahead, knowing that while justice has been deeply delayed, its pursuit is now relentless. The outcome is not yet written, but the story of Beverly Wivell, once a cold case, is now fiercely alive, demanding its final long overdue chapter.